Previously on Unscripted.
By the way, I actually did like this music even before I saw these movies.
That makes sense to me because you were a little bit avant-garde, I'm sure. You were more progressive musically than most people that I knew.
And that's the first time I've ever been called avant-garde.
You're listening to Unscripted with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Okay, Skip, so today we're going to talk about sports siblings. But before we get to that, I want to tell you what I did last weekend. I had what I like to call a Montreal day in Toronto. And you're probably wondering, what does that mean?
Please explain.
So, first of all, there's a few parts to this. So, as you know, there's a lot of ex-Montrealers living in Toronto and, in the GTA and stuff like that. And one of them happens to be the girl who was my neighbor when I was, I think, 8 years old.
Wow.
And I think she was 10 at the time. Yeah, so I tracked her down. She actually lives in Guelph, which is about an hour from Toronto. And, we've spoken a few times and we've met a few times. I hadn't seen her in I don't know, 40 years-ish.
Wow. Wow.
So anyway, we were talking and she said to me, there's a comedian coming to Toronto, a Montreal comedian who you may know. His name is Sugar Sammy. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Oh, yeah, he's very well known. His shows are in English and in French. I don't know if he's in Toronto, I don't know if he does the French part, but when he's here, his shows are both languages. And he makes fun of English and French.
He makes
equally.
fun of not just English and French, every religion, every race, you name it, he makes fun of it.
Yeah.
So she asked me if I wanted to see him live because he was appearing live in Toronto last weekend. So I said yes. And I asked her because we were going to get something to eat before. So I don't know if I ever told you this, but I think in 2019, a restaurant opened up in Scarborough, which is about 30 minutes from here, called Sumilicious. And this restaurant is owned by a guy who used to work at Schwartz's for about 17 years. So if you go to the website, the sandwiches look just like the sandwiches at Schwartz's. But of course, I was skeptical because I've heard of Montreal smoked meat in Toronto and Montreal bagels in Toronto, and I'm always disappointed.
Right. I mean, yeah.
So, but actually, friends of mine, ex-Montrealers, have been to this restaurant once or twice, and they told me that it's legit. And I believe them because they're ex-Montrealers.
Right. So you went.
So I went, since I was with an ex-Montrealer, and we were going to see a Montreal comedian. We went to this restaurant, and sure enough, it was... I don't know if it was as good as Schwartz's, but it was pretty damn close to Schwartz's. They even have the black cherry, the caught black cherry, which, by the way, is impossible to find anywhere.
They used to have it. They used to have that caught black cherry at Dollarama.
I know. Yeah. That's the only place you can find it, I think.
But I don't know if they even have it anymore. It's really, that's pretty amazing, actually. So would you go back there? You would.
Oh, yeah. No, I will be going back there because another friend of mine has never been and he wants to go. So okay. I'm going to have to go with that friend, too, at some point.
So next time I come to Toronto, we're going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it. I can't wait.
So, Skip, did we get any listener mail from our last episode?
Mailbag.
We did. We have our loyal listeners. Dan from North Carolina via Facebook. Congrats on the rebrand, guys. Love the new name and the new look. This episode was more enjoyable than I expected it to be. I thought to myself, Ferris Bueller, Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink. Okay, we're done. I had completely overlooked Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Home Alone as Hughes films. Here's to a new chapter and another 269 unscripted episodes. Thank you so much, Dan. Your support is incredible.
That is a great email. Thanks.
Yeah. Our good friend Jesse Jackson in Dallas, Texas. I love the John Hughes episode. I don't know if my list would be any different than yours. He has an amazing body of work and a wonderful writer, director, and Jesse said great episode. So thank you so much for that, Jesse. There's something that happened at work this week that's related to listener mail. It's really weird because we just released this John Hughes episode.
Yeah.
And then on Tuesday morning, literally there was this email exchange between a bunch of people in my department and kind of a more senior person didn't really understand what one of my other coworkers was trying to explain. So I chimed in on this thread late because I was too busy, and then I read the whole thing and I was like, it's kind of ridiculous. So then I wrote a more detailed explanation as to why something was important. And then that was the end of the thread. No one wrote anything after that because what I said was like 100% right and irrefutable. You know?
I'm still wondering how this has to do with John Hughes.
Literally a minute after I sent that email, my coworker read it. We're on Microsoft Teams at work, right? So literally like a minute after I wrote that email, I get a Microsoft Teams message from one of the people on the thread, and she writes, "Ferris Bueller, you're my hero."
What is that?
Ferris Bueller, you're my hero.
That's hilarious.
And she had no idea that we had just talked about Ferris Bueller on the podcast. She doesn't listen to the podcast, you know, so I just thought, like, this is kind of worlds colliding. It was really, really kind of, like, oddly strange. Anyways.
Speaking of work emails and reply alls, this has nothing to do with John Hughes or our show, but there was an email sent to a bunch of us. I was one of them. And I replied to all. And then a couple of hours later, one of my colleagues on my team sent an email, not to everyone, only to certain people on the thread, asking who was going to reply to the original email. Although I had already replied to the original email. So if you would just look at your inbox, you would have known the answer to that question.
Oh, I hate work. There's so much bad stuff that happens at work, annoying stuff. It's awful. Anyways, that's all I have for listener mail. I do have a message from Mark from Philadelphia, but we're going to save it for the end.
Okay, we'll be right back after this to talk about sports siblings.
You're listening to Unscripted.
Are you taking a month-long vacation in the stratosphere and you know how hard it is to hold your breath? Are you the cosmic kid in full costume dress? You've got a nice little place in the podcast universe with Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is your podcast for all things Bruce Springsteen fandom. We discuss his music, we talk about his tour, and we also talk to fans of other musicians and share their story of their passion, their fandom, and the way that their favorite artist music makes them feel. Set Listing Bruce, a Bruce Springsteen fan podcast, is available wherever you find podcasts. Remember, there is magic in the night.
And now, back to Unscripted.
Okay, Skip, we're back.
So, you know, we texted during the week like we always do. What's the topic going to be? You know, I feel like we should prepare more. We only start texting like on Wednesday. but anyways, and we went back and forth. We couldn't really agree on something. And then all of a sudden you texted me the next day and we're like, let's do sports siblings. I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Well, that was one of the options you gave me. And so I figured it was timely.
So what are we talking about when we're saying sports siblings? We're talking about brothers or sisters that play, you know, both are athletes, professional athletes, or somehow renowned athletes. You mentioned that you have a brother-sister, I think, in your list. You kind of alluded to that in your text.
Right, because I think the original topic was sports brothers, and I said, can we do sisters also?
Of course we could, yes. So I don't know how you, like, one thing about our lists, which is I find amazing, is we don't discuss the criteria at all. So, like, actually, it's pretty amazing that sometimes your list and my list actually could almost be about a different topic, even though it's the same topic, because the way we decide on stuff could be completely different. But like, the way I made my list was like, it's definitely my favorite. It's not the best. So you're not going to hear me talk about Serena and Venus Williams. They would be number one on the list if we talked about the best, you know. But so it's my favorites, and then also, my criteria was they both have to be good. It's like I don't have Wayne Gretzky and Keith Gretzky on my list. Now you could tell me you did different, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, they both had to be good. It couldn't be like just one and like a hanger on. And it's you. And like I said, it's my favorites. It's athletes that I like, respect, whatever, you know. So what about you?
So I had completely different criteria, and I knew I would.
Here we go.
So for me, as long as I liked one of them, they could make my list. I didn't have to like both of them. That's number one. Number two, it's not the best. Because if it was the best, I might have picked like Peyton and Eli Manning, for example. But they're not in here.
Yeah. Right.
So yes, so as long as I liked one of them. Also, sometimes, and I will explain this when I get to it, but there's a reason that I picked that combination, that duo, or that trio, for example. There's a reason. And maybe it's just because I want to talk about that guy or that team or whatever.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. No, so I think we're more or less aligned. I think the lists should be, I don't know how many we're going to have the same, but
we might have none the same this time, actually.
I'm thinking like one. Like I'm looking at my top 5 and I'm thinking maybe there's one the same, but not more than one.
Okay.
Now, how hard was it to make your list? For me, I thought this was going to be difficult. I was like, oh my God, it's only Wednesday. It's like Thursday morning. I don't have anything. I haven't started. This is going to take a while. And then I just started to look at different lists that you find on the internet. And I'm like, before I knew it, I had 25 names that I had jotted down as potential. And then getting to the top 5 was actually really easy. What about you? Do you have also a million honorable mentions or?
So I had about, I guess, I don't know, maybe 15 total. It was very easy to get to 15. Cutting it down to 5 was actually not that difficult either. Although I did make some last minute changes about an hour ago. So
you're famous for that.
There were 2 that are on my list that weren't originally on my list. They were in the honorable mentions, but I bumped them up. So
I love when you call an audible at the last minute.
Yeah, exactly. So no, it wasn't hard to do. There's so many to choose from. And again, I wasn't worried about do they have the best stats or whatever. Some of the reasons that these people are on my list are ridiculous reasons.
I can't wait to hear the ridiculous reasons. These are going to be great.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's mostly the honorable mentions, which I'll do later. You'll understand why.
Number 5.
So number 5 for me, you mentioned them, and it's Peyton and Eli Manning.
Okay.
Now, it's not for the reasons you think, right? Obviously, I'm an Eagles fan, so I couldn't care less about Eli Manning. I wasn't a huge Peyton Manning fan when he played. I thought he was a great player, but I didn't really care about him that much. He's just whatever, especially when he went to Denver. I was like, I didn't love him, but it's everything that they've done that's not part of football that actually makes them make this list, right? Eli and Peyton on the Monday Night Football second broadcast, I don't know what you want to call it. They're great. It's a great addition. It's a beautiful thing. Now other networks are trying to copy this, and it's not working because they don't have the right chemistry because they make it work because they're who they are. And I mean, Peyton Manning, the commercials that he does, the appearances on Saturday Night Live, he is funny as hell, right? And I just think that Peyton is pretty talented in terms of comedy or just being goofy, and Eli is also this weird little brother when they do their broadcast together. So they're really, really likable. So when you combine that with their careers, because Peyton is definitely a Hall of Famer. I mean, Giants fans think Eli is a Hall of Famer. I don't know, but he won 2 Super Bowls and he beat the Patriots. He should get on the list just for beating the Patriots twice in the Super Bowl.
I would put him on the list for that.
Yeah. So because of all that, they're number 5 on my list.
Great. So number 5 for me is Kia and Darnell Nurse. So the cool thing about this is they don't play the same sport. One is a girl, one's a guy. Kia is a woman in the WNBA. She plays for the Seattle Storm. And Darnell's a guy who plays hockey for the Edmonton Oilers. So I thought it was cool because, it's one thing if you have 2 brothers who do the same thing, they play the same sport like Peyton and Eli. But here you've got a brother and a sister who don't even play the same sport, but they're both really good at their respective sports. And I'm going to cheat like you do sometimes. They actually have a cousin who is Sarah Nurse, not a sibling. Sarah Nurse plays for the Canadian Women's Olympic Hockey Team. So this family is very, very talented.
That's awesome.
Number 4.
Okay, so number 4 for me, Josh, I'm going back to the 80s. We're going back to when we followed hockey like crazy in Montreal. Canadians-Nordiques rivalry was at its peak. And the Nordiques had 3 brothers on the same team, which was absolutely incredible. Peter Stastny, Anton Stastny, and Marian Stastny. And they all played at the same time, sometimes on the same line. Peter Stastny's a Hall of Famer. He's probably the greatest player in the history of the Nordiques, let's say before the Colorado switcheroo. because, Forsberg, Sakic, you can put them in the argument. But Peter Stastny was an incredible player. And their whole story about how they came to the NHL, how they got to Canada, leaving Czechoslovakia at the time, obviously wasn't very easy. I think the Nordiques kind of smuggled them out during a junior hockey tournament, or one of them. There's all kinds of crazy shenanigans that went on back then to try to get these players to leave the Eastern European bloc. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm a Canadiens fan, obviously. I hated the Nordiques. They were scumbags. But I had so much respect for Peter Stastny and his two brothers, Anton and Marian.
So they're actually in my honorable mentions. And one thing I will say is they have two offspring currently playing in the NHL, Paul and Jan, who don't play on the same team, but just interesting that two of their kids play in the NHL right now.
Right.
So next for me, I'm sure this is not on your list. It's Justine, Chloe, and Maxime Dufour-Lapointe. So three sisters.
Oh, that's a great one.
Three sisters from Montreal, all of them freestyle skiers. All three of them have been to the Winter Olympics together. And in fact, there was a tournament in 2016, not the Olympics, where they finished 1, 2, 3, gold, silver, bronze at home at the Val Saint-Côme World Cup. So, I mean, again, to have one kid that's really good at a sport is one thing. To have two is incredible. To have three, where all three are good, and all three got a medal in the same event, is pretty remarkable.
It's pretty crazy. They all played the same sport, right? And they were kind of the face of Canada's Winter Olympics for the last few Olympics, right? Because, well, they're very photogenic, first of all, and they're personable, and everyone loves their story, and they seem like great women, So yeah, that's a great pick, Josh.
And I think one of our friends, Jamie in Montreal, has met one of them because they were bike riding near their house one day and somehow just bumped into one of them.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. By the way, sorry, I should mention, it's Jamie's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday, Jamie.
He'll never hear this.
Absolutely not.
Number 3.
Number 3 for me, Josh, I'm staying in the world of hockey. And this one could be just based on merit. If you look at their stats, their career accomplishments, everything like that, these guys are in. And this is the one that I thought maybe was going to make your list also. I mean, if you're from Montreal, there is no more iconic brother duo than Maurice and Henry Richard. Like, that's it.
I
right?
thought you were going to say Russ and Jeff Courtnall.
That would be great. But Jeff never played for the Canadiens, though.
That's
Only
true.
Russ. So, I mean, Maurice Richard, he's the first player in the history of the NHL ever to score 50 goals in 50 games. He's a Montreal Canadiens legend. Maybe, obviously he played in the 50s, so it's hard to compare eras, but maybe the greatest goal scorer ever when you go game per game, And then a lot of people don't know this. Well, I mean, our fans do because there's a lot of hockey fans, but Henry Richard has won more championships than any player in any sport, basically. He won 16 Stanley Cups. Now, people are going to be like, what? I'm like, yeah, he won 16 Stanley Cups. That's crazy. First of all, it's crazy to play for 16 years.
Also, there were fewer teams back then, but yes, it is remarkable.
Yes, of course. But I mean, they still did award the Stanley Cup even when there was only 6 teams. So just for all those reasons, they're both Hall of Famers. They're both legends. So they're number 3 in my list of sports siblings.
So just to spoiler alert, they're not on my list.
Oh, well, then we're not going to have any the same.
We won't have any the same. So next for me, remember I told you only one of them had to be good, right? So the next duo for me is Vladimir and Wilton Guerrero. Now, we know Wilton was really nothing, right? He wasn't really...
Wilton!
I just put this on my list because I wanted an excuse to talk about the Montreal Expos, obviously. That's why they're on my list.
Okay.
So in doing my research, by the way, I mean, you know everything about Vladimir and Wilton Guerrero. I don't need to tell you. I'm not going to start telling you their stats. But this is interesting, and I don't think it will surprise you. So according to official MLB records, Wilton Guerrero was born on October 24th, 1974. However, this date is believed to be incorrect, given the fact that his brother Vlad was born less than 4 months later on February 9th, 1975. So Vladimir's birth date was originally listed as February 9th, 1976, but he was revealed to be a year older in 2009.
Yeah.
At that point, Wilton no longer played in the majors, so it was likely that nobody noticed or nobody cared.
Right. I mean, there's always been talk. I mean, not talk. I mean, now it's a fact. Like some of the ages of these players coming from the Dominican and Cuba and places like this, no one really knows.
Right.
Like
they fake their age because they want the scouts to think that they're actually younger than they are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and here you have like clearly the birth dates are wrong. I mean, obviously, physically impossible to be born 4 months apart from the same mother.
Right.
It's not possible. Didn't you used to call Wilton Guerrero wilted?
That someone did. It wasn't me,
WILTED.
but somebody did. I thought it was you who used to call him that.
No, I thought it was you.
Because I remember hearing people say that, but I don't think it was me.
Wilted. I mean, look, Wilton Guerrero is lucky that his brother was so good because otherwise he would have never been in the major leagues.
I mean, Wilton Guerrero was basically a younger version of Rodney Scott.
Maybe, yeah. I don't think he was as fast. Anyways, I can't believe they're in your list. I mean, I could have put I could have put Keith and Wayne Gretzky just so I could talk about Wayne Gretzky.
I know, but I told you, only one had to be good, and I wanted to talk about the Expos. So there you go.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's sort of on the lines of my number 2.
Number 2.
Which is Steph and Seth Curry.
I considered them.
So 2 famous brothers, one really famous, both brothers playing in the NBA. Obviously, everybody knows Steph Curry, multiple NBA champion, probably the greatest shooter. I mean, I'm not afraid to say it. I said it like 5 years ago. He's the greatest shooter we've ever seen. Anytime we talked about Steph Curry on this podcast, I've said the same thing. He's the greatest shooter. He's changed everything about the NBA. Kids, new players coming up, they're copying the way he plays. The 3-point line is getting longer and longer. For him, the 3-point line is only a suggestion. It's not the line. That's a suggestion. He doesn't care where he shoots from. You know, like he doesn't care how far it is. He's just an incredible player, and he proved it in the finals this year against the Celtics because they had no answer for him. He's the smallest guy on the court, and they have no answer for him. And he's just incredible. And Seth Curry has an even better story in a way because, I mean, as people don't know, me and Josh know about Seth Curry from a long time ago because he went to Duke, and he was a really good player on Duke, and he was a really good shooter. And then he didn't get drafted in the NBA. And he went to the G League. He got signed to like a 10-day contract, and the 10-day contract turned into another 10-day contract. And then before you know it, he had a 1-year contract. And now he's an established NBA player. He's played on a few teams. He was really good on the Sixers a few years ago. He was in the trade last year for Ben Simmons. And Matthew, my son, is a huge Sixers fan, and he's like, we should have never traded that guy. And he's on Brooklyn now, and he's really like an established good NBA player. Like it's incredible how hard he worked to get where he is, you know. And you could say the same thing about Steph because I mean the guy went to Davidson.
I actually saw one of those Davidson games where Steph Curry was playing.
Yeah, I mean, but like when Steph Curry played college, at Davidson, he looked like a little kid. You know, he was so small, no one took him seriously, and he constantly proved everybody wrong to become, you know, probably one of the best players in our lifetime. So the Curry brothers are my number 2. And of course, you know, they have a famous dad, Del Curry, who played in the NBA too. So.
Yep. In fact, I think Del's kids went to school in Toronto at one point because I think Del played on the Raptors at one point.
Yes, the Curry brothers have a bit of history in the city of Toronto. I don't know if they went to school or whatever, but part of their childhood was growing up in Toronto when they played on the Raptors. And I saw an interview with Steph, I think, once, and he has good memories of Toronto.
That school team must have been pretty good.
Yeah, no kidding.
So the next one for me is pretty much a carbon copy of the last one that I just did. It's Pedro and Ramon Martinez. Again, I'm not going to tell you about their stats because you know, and obviously Pedro is a much better pitcher than Ramon.
But it's different than your Guerrero brothers because Ramon was good.
Yes, Ramon was good.
Yeah.
And Ramon is the older one. And when he was pitching for the Dodgers, Ramon, this is before really anyone knew who Pedro was, he repeatedly tried to tell the Dodgers that his younger brother was better than him. But the Dodgers didn't listen, and they traded him to the Expos for Delino DeShields. And then, of course, Pedro went on to win 3 Cy Young Awards and was a first ballot inductee into the Hall of Fame. Yeah. So again, these guys are on my list just because I wanted to talk about the Expos. That's all.
Look, I love Pedro Martinez. He's the greatest pitcher the Expos ever had, even if it was for a shorter period of time, you know. When they talk about his years on the Red Sox, he had like a crazy 5-year stretch where he was obviously the best pitcher in baseball. There's that first year of those 5 when he was still on the Expos, which is just as good as any other year, you know, when you consider the lineup he had and everything. Like, it's incredible. I love Pedro. And actually, Ramon was a great player, actually. We could do a whole episode about that Delano DeShields trade. Like, I was so mad when they traded Delano.
I was furious. And you know, we went to that winter caravan like a few weeks after that trade, and you had to hold me back. I almost punched, was it Dan Duquette?
Yeah, we cornered Dan Duquette. I kind of felt bad for him because we cornered him and asked him a bunch of questions. But, like, he proved us all wrong because, like, Delano wasn't good after.
Right. Although
was incredible.
in general, and baseball's much different now. Back then, I would never trade an everyday player for a guy who's only going to pitch once every 5 days.
That's a general rule that is true, and it applies more now than ever because the starting pitchers are less important now.
Exactly.
Number 1.
All right, so we've arrived at number 1. You know who it is.
Actually, I don't know. Oh, I could guess, but I'm not sure. You're not going to guess my number 1.
These guys are the talk of sports news this whole week and this upcoming week because of the Super Bowl. And they're even calling it the Kelce Bowl because it's Jason Kelce and Travis Kelce. That's my number 1. And it's very timely because, you know, obviously they're both in the Super Bowl. They're both going to be Hall of Famers. There's no doubt about that. Jason Kelce is the center of the Eagles. Travis Kelce, the tight end of the Chiefs. He's the best tight end in the league. I mean, you don't know much about offensive line, but Travis Kelce is the best center in the league. He's, you know, all pro, first team, everything like this. And there's all these rumors that, like, he's going to retire. He was supposed to retire last year. He stayed for 1 more year. He's probably happy that he did because they're going to the Super Bowl. And of course, I mentioned to you at the end of the year podcast that our end of the year podcast about our favorite podcast of the year. And I talked to you about the New Heights podcast. This is a podcast that these two brothers started this year about life inside the NFL and everything. And it's really crazy that they started this podcast this year and every week they talk about their games and then into the playoffs. And then now they're in the Super Bowl. Like, it's just crazy. Like, it's just kind of unbelievable that they have this brand new podcast and they've made it to, like, their dream scenario of, like, they're playing against each other, you know? So it's pretty amazing. The podcast is really funny. I know you listened to it this week for the first time because exactly of what I just said, because of the circumstances. And you told me you didn't really like it. And I get that. I understand.
It was a little too long and it was a little too inside baseball. And it was basically the two brothers just talking. So,
yeah,
which is really not much different from our show.
As I was listening, I was trying to put myself in your head. And I was like, I could see why, like, you probably wouldn't like it. There's a lot of ads. They're talking about a lot of stuff that they're assuming you know about. Like, if you didn't watch the football all year and you haven't watched a lot of football, although I think you did last week, but you don't know mostly what they're talking about, you know? Yeah.
There was one part during their show where Travis said to Jason, "Didn't you just break a record recently?" And Jason's like, "I don't have any stats. I can't break records."
Exactly. What does he have stats? He's an offensive line.
So I found that interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, so those guys are my number 1. And obviously, you know, I hope Jason wins the Super Bowl.
Nice. Okay, number 1 for me. I don't think you're going to guess this in a million years. It's the Hanson brothers from the movie Slapshot. Now.
Well, that's ridiculous.
First of all, you cheat all the time, so I'm allowed to cheat. That's number 1. But number 2, if you're going to sit there and tell me that they're not actually athletes, well, I have to tell you that the 3 actors who played the Hanson brothers in the movie actually did play hockey. 2 of them.
But the thing is, are they actually brothers?
So I'll get to that in a minute. In the movie,
that's why I'm saying, like, I don't even know if they're actually brothers.
Okay, in the movie, all 3 of them are brothers, of course. Now, the actors, the real people.
Yeah.
One of them is Steve Carlson. The other one is Jeff Carlson. They are actually brothers in real life. And they also actually played hockey in real life. They have a third brother whose name is Jack. And Jack was supposed to be the third Hansen brother in the movie because all three of them played for a team called the Johnstown Jets of the WHA. So all three of them were supposed to be in the movie because the movie started shooting at the end of the hockey season. However, Jack got called up by the Edmonton Oilers in 1976 for their WHA playoff run. So Jack had to be replaced by a guy named Dave Hansen, who also actually played hockey. And so that's part of the reason why they decided to call them the Hansen brothers instead of the Carlson brothers.
Okay.
So they are actually brothers, and they did actually play hockey.
But they're not brothers, because the three that are the most famous, one is not a brother. One is just a guy.
But two of them are.
Two of them are. Okay.
Two of them are. But anyway, again, I can make my own rules. You cheat all the time. And this is the best brother combo in sports, without a doubt.
But why do you like them so much?
Because, first of all, the movie's hilarious. And
It is,
these three are could be the best part of that entire movie. Except for maybe the French-Canadian goalie.
Yeah, I go to penalty box, 2 minutes, feel shame. Yeah. But the incredible thing about the Hansen brothers is they've made a whole career for 40 years after the movie. They're still in character, making appearances and doing stuff. That movie has spawned a whole career for these three nobodies, really, right?
For sure. All you have to do is do one amazing thing in your life and people will never forget you.
This is true.
This is a perfect example. And if that movie comes on, I've seen it a million times, anytime it's on television, I'll watch it again. I don't know if it was in my rewatchable movies list when we did that episode, but it should have been.
It wasn't. And I don't even know if it was in our best sports movies.
I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look.
I know you had Youngblood in there.
Oh, that's also a good one. By the way, a lot of the actors in Youngblood and in Slapshot actually are hockey players because it's impossible to find an actor who actually knows how to skate.
Well, that's the amazing thing. If you read the behind the scenes of the making of the movie Miracle, about the 1980 U.S. hockey team.
It's a good movie.
They had to cast all those guys who could play, right? Most of those guys are ex-players, and then the guys who are actually actors really had to know how to at least skate, But
also a lot of movies use stunt doubles. So a lot of the hockey scenes are not the actual actor that you think it is.
Of course, yeah. So I want to run through, without any comment, on rapid fire, all my honorable mentions.
Okay, and then I'll do the same.
So as to not leave anybody out, just so you know that I didn't forget about certain people, because people are like, wow, you didn't talk about Serena and Venus Williams? Well, I told you, I never really liked them that much, So Serena and Venus, Jim and John Harbaugh, Cal and Billy Ripken, the Sutter brothers, there's 6 of them that played in the NHL, the Plumlee brothers, Duke basketball fame, Daniel and Henrik Sedin, Sterling and Shannon Sharp, JJ and TJ Watt, and actually there's a third brother in the Watt family, Phil and Tony Esposito, Frank and Pete Mahovlich, Scott and Rob Niedermeyer, Sacco and Mikko Koivu, Eric, Mark, Jordan Stahl, Marcel and Gilbert Dion, the Jones brothers. One guy's in the NFL, and then the other brother is John Bones Jones. He's an MMA fighter.
Okay.
And I think there's a third one also. Anyways, Wayne and Keith Gretzky, Corey and Kyle Seager, LaMelo, Leangelo, and Lonzo Ball. And now the brother-sister combos, Phil and Amanda Kessel. And then our favorite, Josh, Cami and Tony Granato, because we actually knew Cami Granato a little bit.
Yes, Cami and Tony Granato are on my list. They almost made it onto my actual list. And I met Cami once at Concordia.
Yeah, it was crazy. We were at the Concordia hockey game watching the men's team play, and there's these girls sitting right behind us, and it's Cami Granato, because at the time there was no U.S. hockey programs for women. She came to Montreal to Concordia University of all places to play hockey. It was amazing.
Concordia had the best women's hockey team in the world at that point.
At that time, yeah.
Yeah, but I also bumped into her at the library once, not just at the hockey
she was a regular. She was a regular student, And then next thing you know, we're seeing her on TV playing in the Olympics.
So I had some of the same ones you did, like Daniel and Henrik Sedin, Peter Anton and Marion Stastny. I also had John and Patrick McEnroe because John McEnroe was the first tennis player to not sort of play by the rules and be proper, he would yell and scream. So I kind of like that about John. I have Mark and Pau Gasol on my list because people have told me that I look like one of them. I don't even know which one, but some people have told me I look like one of them.
Yeah, you look like Pau Gasol. Yeah, I could see that.
And then I also have Tyus and Trey Jones because I met Trey Jones and interviewed him when he was on Duke.
Nice. Very nice. Really very nice and good.
We'll be right back with some final thoughts.
You're listening to Unscripted.
Do you know John Hyatt songs?
Maybe you know them from being covered by Roseanne Cash, Three Dog Night, the Neville Brothers, Emmylou Harris, Eric Clapton, B.B. King, Jeff Healey, Bonnie Raitt, or literally hundreds of others.
Maybe you have some of his albums on your shelf or in your cow-horned Cadillac right now.
I'm Jesse Jackson,
And I'm Sylvan Brough.
and we're going to dive in from A to Z. Join us on the Perfectly Good podcast.
We're going to discuss all of your favorites and uncover some forgotten gems, from Aces Up Your Sleeve to Zero House.
Rate and debate every John Hyatt song on the Perfectly Good podcast. Have a little faith.
Unscripted with Skip and Josh is available wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. To interact with the show, send an email to skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter and go to Facebook to like the show page. And now, some final thoughts from the guys.
So I have a lot of stuff that I wanted to say for the end here. There's almost too much. So like I'm going to try to do them quick, but like I sort of mentioned earlier that I got a text this week from Mark from Philadelphia, and he sent me this article about the skills competition. Did you watch the NHL skills competition last night?
I watched a little bit of it, and there are some events that I like, and there are some that I hate.
So in the article, it says that they're doing Florida-centric skills. Like first of all, he asked me, what are Florida-centric skills? And my reply to that was, isn't it like cooking crystal meth? Like, isn't that a Florida-centric skill? Like, I didn't get it. So
I can explain if you'd like, because I watched it.
But apparently they had like playing golf with a hockey stick and like stuff like this. It seems so ridiculous.
There was one good event where basically there's a guy sitting, and it was Sidney Crosby, like in a dunk tank. And so they're on the beach, but they've got some sort of surface that's slippery, so you could actually take a proper shot. And you have to hit all these surfboards. And if you hit all 5 or 6 of the surfboards, then you have to hit an NHL logo. And if you hit all of them and the NHL logo, then the dunk tank falls. So that's a Florida-centric skill, I guess.
But you're hitting them with what? You're shooting a puck?
You're shooting a puck, yes. But you have to lift it all. Like you have to take a wrist shot. Yeah. It has to be high enough to hit the surfboard.
Sure. So I didn't watch 1 minute of the thing. I won't watch the All-Star game either. I'm not into it. But like on Twitter this morning, the first thing I saw is national media, sports reporters, hockey reporters, they're all in agreement that the skills competition was brutal. It was awful. And that the NHL should be embarrassed. And I was like, wow, this is like really incredible. I was like, wow, this is like, the reaction was so strong. I was kind of surprised, but anyways.
I'm surprised because I did watch a bit of it last night, and the media who was covering it.
Well, they have to like it. They're the national broadcaster.
Right. The problem with this whole skills competition in hockey is, they try to, because it's in Florida, they tried to do some Florida specific skills, like you said. If they just left it to regular hockey skills, like, for example, the hardest shot is something that I like to watch, or the fastest skater is something that I like to watch. My favorite one is actually the shooting accuracy, where they have to hit those, targets in all 4 corners.
Yeah, but now they did it with surfboards.
No, because they did the one on the ice also.
Okay.
So if they just left it to these events on the ice and didn't do all this other silly stuff, where they have to there's one skill where they have to dress up in a weird costume and whatever. I'm not even going to get into it, and it's judged. If they just eliminated those silly things and just did hockey stuff, like they had a new one last night where the goalie, how sometimes they go behind their own net to get the puck in an actual game, and sometimes they dump it to the other side, like if the other team has pulled the goalie and they try to score.
Yeah.
So they had that skill where the goalie had to try to score from his own net, it's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're using a goalie stick. So that was that was cool.
But you like that?
I did like that one, yeah. Now, the one interesting thing that you missed because you didn't watch it is So one of the skills is judged, which again, it's a stupid skill. But one of the judges was the guy from the White Lotus, the kid. I forget his name.
Albie.
Yeah.
Albie.
Who, by the way, I didn't know till yesterday, he's Canadian.
Oh, that's crazy. But why was he there?
Because he was one. They have celebrity judges. He was one of the
I know,
celebrity
but like
judges.
he's a hockey fan. He lives in Florida. Like, what's the tie-in?
I don't know. He's Canadian. That's why. One of the other judges was the lead singer of the Arkells, Max Kerman.
Oh, okay. Anyways, look, they put it on. They hope people are going to watch, and some people like it, and some people don't, and it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Did you watch the football skills competition 2 days ago?
It was 2 days ago. I thought it's this weekend.
No, it was 2 days ago.
Oh man, I didn't even watch it.
So
I
actually,
didn't watch it. It looks stupid.
I didn't watch it either, but I saw some highlights. They have some interesting events in the football skills competition. Like there are some silly ones where you have to throw a water balloon to your partner, and he has to catch it without it breaking, which is almost impossible. Right. So that one was interesting. They have this other one where you have to jump off a diving board into a pool, and as you're jumping, someone's throwing a football to you. Anyway, there were some interesting skills.
But aren't they doing a flag football game? Maybe that's on the weekend. See, I'm so lost. This goes to show you how useless the Pro Bowl. Well, it's not even the Pro Bowl. They're calling it the Pro Bowl weekend or whatever now. It is. It just goes to show, right?
Right. I didn't know that the NHL All-Star game was today until yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, but the biggest problem with the Pro Bowl, whatever they're going to do is the players from the two best teams are not there.
Right. And there are some other good players who aren't there either.
So how do you do some kind of skills competition for quarterbacks and you don't have Patrick Mahomes there? Then the whole thing it's kind of stupid.
Well, I think actually Derek Carr won the best QB in the skills competition.
Well, there you go. So he's gonna try to like leverage that to get a new contract, right? He's gonna say, "Look, I won the skills competition. I'm not washed up," and he'll sign somewhere.
Right. It was pretty cool if you watched it. They also played dodgeball. One of the events was dodgeball.
I mean, come on.
It's just a fun thing. It wasn't like a serious thing, obviously. It's for people like who are under 20 years old. That's who it's for.
Okay. So segueing to football, the big news this week, Josh, that I know rocked your world. I know how disappointed you must be.
I know what you're going to say.
Tom Brady. I texted you in the morning saying with the link that Tom Brady retired. And then you wrote me back saying, I don't believe it. He's like a New York City sewer rat. He's impossible to kill.
Exactly. I'm just waiting. Is it going to be 4 or 6 weeks before he comes out of retirement?
I mean, most people are saying, like I listened to a lot of ESPN radio this week. Most people agree that he really is retiring this time. Like, this is it.
I mean, he should, because he's not good anymore.
I mean, he's okay. I mean, he's still one of the best 30 quarterbacks in the league if he would come
I'm not so sure about that. And the rumors before he retired, there were rumors that he was going to go to San Francisco. San Francisco currently has 3 quarterbacks who are all better than him right now. Not career, obviously, but right now, all 3 of them are better than him. I don't know why they would want Tom Brady.
Well, they're all injured. That's why.
Yeah, but they'll all be fine by the time next season starts.
Well, Garoppolo's not coming back. The coach said that. Everybody knows.
That's fine.
But they have 2 other guys.
Right.
I mean, the 49ers invested so much draft capital. Like, they drafted this guy, Trey Lance. He was supposed to be their quarterback. He was their quarterback in the first game of the season until he got injured. So in the 49ers brain trust, obviously there's people that do believe in this guy, right? So, it's weird. The rumors, yeah.
There's no reason not to believe in Trey Lance. I mean, he played a game and a half. He got injured. If you thought he was good, why would you think he's not good anymore?
Yeah, there you go. But anyways, look, I wish Tom Brady a happy retirement. I hope he rides off into the sunset, and I hope we never see him on an NFL field again. The worst rumor is that they're going to give him like the biggest contract in the history of like color commentators to come into one of the broadcast teams.
I don't think it's a rumor. I think it's a fact. I think he's getting $350 million to go to Fox. I don't think it's a rumor.
But he's boring as hell. Tom Brady is the most boring. Like, who would want to listen to this guy talk?
I mean, all these television networks make a big deal when they acquire a different sports property and when they hire a new analyst or whatever or announcer. But as a fan, we don't care what channel the game is on, and we don't care
100%.
Who's commentating that game. If we want to watch the game, we're going to watch the game. And if we don't, we won't.
You are 100% right. And I just explained this to my son and his friend. I was like, why would you give Tony Romo like $30 million a year or whatever they're giving him? I don't even know the numbers, whatever it is. Like, he's fine. I like Tony Romo. He does a good job. But like, I'm going to watch the game on CBS, whether Tony Romo's there or whether your Josh Obadia is broadcasting the game or whether there's nobody broadcasting the game. If they have the broadcast rights and they're the only way you can watch the game, you're going to tune in. Like, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So if I was the head of the network, I would never give all these huge contracts out. I would sign all professional broadcasters, like regular broadcasters. I would sign them people who know what they're doing, and I would make them the commentators, and I wouldn't give these exorbitant contracts. And that would be that, because people are going to watch, they don't gain anything in their ratings by having Tony Romo. They don't get any.
Do you remember many, many years ago when Howard Cosell was doing Monday Night Football, one week they tried doing it without any announcer at all, just to see what would happen. And I think it was one of the highest rated television football games of all time.
But do you remember also there was either a month or 2 weeks where there's hockey games that were broadcast with no announcers because there was some kind of strike also?
So there was hockey and football because CBC had hockey and football at the time, and there was a strike. And so they would do the games without any announcers, and you could only hear like the PA announcer in the building, if a goal was scored or whatever, you could hear that.
Look, I think there's a value to having an announcer. I remember watching those hockey games, and they're fine. Like, they're like, oh, it was fun to watch once or twice without an announcer. But the announcer adds to it, for sure. But, like, doesn't mean you have to pay them, Tom Brady, $350 million. Like, there's no way. There's just no way.
Exactly.
Anyways, we went off a little bit too much on sports, which is fine. That's what we like to talk about. Our show, our rules. That's the number one rule of this podcast. So, thanks for talking about the sports siblings, Josh. I really liked our discussion. I found your list interesting and weird at the same time. And I'll talk to you next time.
Have a great week.